Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast. I am Philip. So, Ryan. I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda, and we're your hosts. And today we are talking about learning how to travel.
Yeah, we were going to do a podcast on resources because... Why? Because why?
Well, we had a request to talk about the resources that we use and some of the equipment we use and websites we turn to. And so we have a resources page on our website at www.theworldwanderers.com. So you can go there, click on resources or just /resources, which gives a list of that. But I mean, it's a comprehensive list. It's understandable. It's not rocket science. We thought it would be nice, though, to kind of, talk through these things. And I think something that's really important for listeners out there to remember is that this is an evolving list. It's not set in stone. And
oh, maybe we shouldn't have called it the Bible of travel.
Oh, God. But it's something that it's based on things that we've learned.
Yeah, and so we were thinking about doing an episode on resources and didn't want it to be like, do A, do B, don't do C, do D. We're like, oh, we should talk about how when we first started traveling, we were dumb. And like now that we've done it a bit, we're like less dumb.
I mean, I think, okay, dumb is a bit of a harsh word. We're inexperienced.
Yeah, so like we've learned how to use some stuff. And now maybe we can help.
I think the thing is that when you have experience doing something, it's nice to share your experience with other people so that other people don't make the mistakes that you've made.
You don't need to justify yourself to me.
So we're going to just get started since we spent 2 minutes talking about what we're going to talk about today. We are going to start with equipment. What equipment do you use, Ryan?
A backpack.
Ryan just travels like naked with a backpack.
Like Wim Hof.
So something that's interesting around that is if you're debating between like duffel bag, suitcase, backpack, I would say backpack is definitely the way to go. The first time I ever went to Europe, I was 18 years old. I went with my family and another family, and I took like the world's biggest suitcase. I probably had a different pair of shoes for every single day we were there. We were there for 3 weeks. You do the math on that one. That's ridiculous. And, enough clothes to wear a different outfit every single day and probably change one. So there's 18-year-old me. So if you're like that, I'm not judging. I was like that too. But you don't need all that crap. You just don't. It was an absolute nightmare trying to take trains in Italy with this massive suitcase. It was a nightmare trying to drag it across cobblestone streets. So if you want to take a suitcase, make sure you can lift it. It should not be heavier than what you're capable of lifting. But a backpack is nice because you throw it on your back and you just go.
Yeah, and it always seems like the less stuff you have, the almost like better time you're having. Mm-hmm. It's just stressful taking more stuff. And it's funny because we got a comment the other day about, I think in one of our past episodes, we mentioned traveling with like 65-liter backpacks. And someone commented being like, wow, you really bring that much stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so my backpack's actually like 70 liters. So my backpack's even bigger than that. But a good rule of thumb is that your backpack shouldn't be, when it's packed and at its heaviest, it shouldn't be more than a third of your body weight. So, or is it a quarter? I think it's a quarter of your body weight.
Why is that a rule of thumb?
I don't know. It's just something that somebody told me, like in terms of what. So if you weigh 120 pounds and you have a 50-pound backpack on your back, like that's almost half of your body weight. Like that's a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's like if you weigh 300 pounds and have 75 pounds worth of stuff.
Okay.
I don't know if that's less ridiculous.
That's a valid point. Actually, I hadn't thought about that if you were a bigger person.
Just from personal experience, when we went traveling the first time, you had already been backpacking in Europe during university. And I remember one thing you told me was when we went backpack shopping was about getting a backpack that you can lay flat on the ground and unzip. Mm-hmm. So some backpacks are kind of like hiking style where like all the shit goes in the top. That's me hitting the table. I talk with my hands versus being able to really unzip it and like pull the top off and not have to pull everything out. And I think that is like such a helpful thing to think about, not to think about, to do. Don't buy a backpack where you have to shove everything in the top.
Yeah, and like something that I really like too is having a separate compartment at the bottom. So the backpack I have, you lay flat, you zip it open, so kind of suitcase style, and then it's got this separate compartment at the bottom. So it's the perfect place to stick like dirty hiking boots, dirty runners, dirty underwear, dirty anything. Because the thing you realize when you start backpacking is that when you take off like, you know, a damp shirt and you shove it on top of your clean stuff, the rest of your bag takes on that smell because it's closed most of the time. So it stinks. It gets damp. If you throw your dirty shoes on top of your clean shorts, your shorts are going to get dirty. So having this separate compartment where you can put your really gross stuff is really helpful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And shoes especially. Mm-hmm. One thing that I have at times been jealous of is how your shoes are so small and you can put them inside your backpack. Whereas I guess this is like, it's fine when we're taking buses or walking around. I can just tie my shoes to the outside of my backpack, or hiking boots, running shoes, whatever, an extra pair of shoes I'm bringing with me. But having that pocket at the bottom. So we both use basically the same Mountain Equipment Co-op backpacks, and Mountain Equipment Co-op is a Canadian thing.
Yeah, it's like the Canadian version of REI. So for our American listeners, REI is probably your go-to for all of your travel needs. You know, for us,
but I don't.
Yeah, Mountain Equipment Co-op is the place to go to get everything.
But I've never been to REI, so it could suck.
Okay, well,
Seems unlikely though.
I have a friend who shops there.
So to return to a point about how much stuff you should bring, I think every time we've traveled, I've taken less stuff. So when first time we went backpacking, my backpack was like full, like bursting at the seams. It was really a pain to close at any time. Like every time we were about to leave a hostel to move to a new one, I was like, this is brutal. It takes so much effort. Second time, less stuff. Most of the time it wasn't that same hassle, but sometimes it got to that point. Then when I went to Central Europe by myself, backpacking,
you took like nothing.
Virtually nothing. Like I had so little stuff. And it's just like so relieving when you can close your backpack easily every single day and it's light to carry around. So I think the next time we go, I'm really going to try to be, it's hard to go from this mindset of you have so much stuff at home and you think you need that stuff because you have it. But
yeah, it's just like, I don't know how I'm going to live without all these different shoes mentality. And then you just do.
Yeah. So even when you're trying to make the choice of like, what do I really need? Like go there plus get rid of a third of the stuff. You like, what do I really, really need? And then you have to get rid of like a third more of that stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting thought. I mean, so something I'm thinking about in, you know, traveling South America for 6 months versus going to Central Europe for 1 month is that you know what your climate's going to be like for that one time. And something that I think does add things to your list is when you're traveling for an extended period of time and you're traveling to more than one place where it's like, okay, it's going to be really hot here, so I need a bathing suit and shorts and a tank top, but it's going to be really cold here, so I have to make sure I've got track pants and like a down jacket. But yeah, I think that that's definitely a great point is like, you know, when you pack all your stuff or pull your stuff out that you want and then kind of like tear that apart and be like, do I really need this? Am I going to wear it? Because for me, I have friends who are like, you must be an expert on packing. And I am definitely not. Like, I need a firm reminder to myself, like, you do not need this. You will not wear this. You do not need it. Like, put it back in your closet. It'll be here when you get home. Mm-hmm. So in saying that, I think there is a few things that from our experience that I feel like are really good to have with you. Like a few other types of, I guess, quote unquote, equipment type things. What's your number one
equipment?
What's your number one form of equipment outside of your backpack?
So when we were talking to Hunter a couple weeks ago, I asked him what did you, like, he had just been, for anyone who didn't listen to that episode, he had been traveling in Central and South America for 15 months. And I asked him, what do you think, like, if you were talking to yourself before you settled on your trip, what would you tell yourself? And he said, oh, I would tell myself to get those little, like, packing compartments.
Yeah. And I mean, I 100% agree with that. I didn't travel with them the first time around, and I saw people with them who just had all their, you know, their tank tops in one of them, their shorts in one of them, their pants in the other. And I was like, damn, I want that. Like, next time I travel, I'm buying those. And so we both got them for our trip to South America. And I don't think I would ever travel without packing compartments again.
Yeah. I think I only had the one. Did you have more than one?
So I only had more than, so I only had one when we went to South America, and I wish I had two. And then I took yours with me to Bali, and having two was so amazing because they fit like so perfectly in my bag and carried almost all of my stuff.
Yeah. I think that if you're going to do them, like, you should try to not so that like everything within your backpack is in a packing compartment instead of having one packing compartment and then a bunch of other stuff. Because I know a lot of times I wasn't completely sure what was where, so I kind of had to dig through everything, pull out my packing compartment, open it up, be like, oh, what I'm looking for isn't actually in there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point for sure. Something that I didn't bring on our first backpacking trip that I got for our second one was an eye mask. I hadn't even like considered that I might need that. But something about sleeping in hostel dorms is, you know, if you want to go to bed before the rest of the room wants to go to bed, then having an eye mask is really nice because sometimes the light isn't turned off. And it can be really frustrating when you're like, oh, I just want to sleep. So having an eye mask is something I would definitely recommend.
Yeah, I think eye mask and earplugs. I always struggle to actually keep earplugs in my ears. But in a hostel, if you choose to stay in hostels, you kind of like sacrifice some control over your sleeping conditions. And instead of, a lot of people have this response of like feeling angry or upset when someone comes in at 1 a.m. and turns on the light, or comes in at 3 a.m. and starts like throwing stuff at their friends. But
I think those are extreme examples. Like if that happens to you, I don't blame you for feeling frustrated. I feel like that's okay. But it's when you want to go to bed at like 9:30 because you've got a 6:30 flight the next day, where it's like, okay, you know, there's other people in your room and it's 9:30 at night. Like it's not really lights out yet.
Yeah. But I think the stoic approach to travel requires an eye mask.
Yeah.
And I think when I first started traveling, like when we went our first time, I think I felt like a bit like a dweeb. The thought of wearing an eye mask, it's like it kind of feels like a girly thing,
or like an old person thing. Like I totally get that, and I'm a female. Like I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I want to like put it on and then roll towards the wall side of my bed so Sonny doesn't come in and be like, "Who's the granny with the eye mask?"
Yeah, but I think like one of the things we've talked about so many times is doing what's great for you and not caring about what people think.
I think also too, like when you're actually looking around at other people, like most people have eye masks. Like if people are concerned about their quality of sleep, they usually have an eye mask.
Do you think so?
I think so. I've seen lots of people with eye masks.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit less common than I would have expected. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely eye mask.
Yeah, sure. And earplugs too. I would say it's nice to just have them. They're so cheap. Like so affordable. And it's nice to just have them for those moments when like somebody's being loud, you're tired, you're feeling frustrated, and you're like, this isn't about them. It's about me really wanting to sleep right now. Plug your earplugs in your ears and just, you know, kind of block out that noise.
Yeah. And I recently got, I think it's called like a Sleep Master eye mask, which is like this.
Oh, it's fancy.
Like luxurious, the kind of like silky eye mask, which actually like stays on your head, and it's fantastic. Yeah,
we'll put a link to that in the show notes because that's like if you're going to invest in an eye mask, like get one that feels good on your head.
Yes. And another piece of equipment that is obviously very helpful and that we didn't really have with us when we went to South America was a proper power converter.
Yeah, I'd been to Peru before, and like Peru works off of the same plugins. So I just kind of made this like really dumb assumption that the entire continent of South America you didn't need power converters for, which is like, that just sounds so ridiculous when I say it out loud, but that's what I did. You can always like buy them down there. It's just a little bit, sometimes it's a bit of a hassle, especially when you're like, okay, you know, my phone or my camera has 30% battery to last for like 4 hours maybe, and I don't have a way to charge it. In Buenos Aires in Argentina, we found one on the street, and that seemed to work all right for us. But
yeah, we did go through a period of time where we, like a couple weeks, where we hadn't found one, and
kind of just like borrow people.
Yeah, we're like at the hostel, find one sitting around. But it's one of those things where, like, for example, if you decide that you're not going to pack a sweater because you're only going to a cold place in a few months, you don't know how cold it will be. If you get there, it's so easy to find a sweater. A power converter, it's like, that can be a bit difficult to find.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something, it's small, it's really lightweight. And I don't think you should buy like maybe you have to buy a big package, but do your research and look at them. Like they usually say on the packages, which is good for which continent. So, I mean, if you're not going to Europe, don't pack the European converters. Like just pack the ones that say that they're for South America. So you don't need to add too much weight to your bag. They're pretty lightweight. Something else that we traveled with both times, and I think I kind of learned about my first backpacking trip, is traveling with travel locks. And I think we've talked about it in a few different episodes, but our sort of theory on arriving in a busy hostel dorm room, like where you don't know anyone, is make your bag the least easiest to steal. It's sort of this like philosophy that we have. And I mean, everyone's different. Lots of people will just like open their bags up and leave their stuff. You'll find people who leave cell phones and laptops on their bed for the whole day. I've just traveled too much and heard too many stories about people stealing stuff or strangers getting into the dorm rooms and taking things. So I just don't do that. I just tuck my stuff away. I always lock up like my passport, my money, my credit cards, that sort of thing. I just feel like the hassle of getting them stolen is not worth it compared to the 5 seconds it takes to lock your bag.
Yeah. And we found that almost every hostel we went to in South America had lockers in the dorm rooms or somewhere that you could use, and you just had to have your own lock for it. But being able to lock your bag to like your bed, or just lock up one compartment on one of your bags, is can really help you not getting your stuff stolen. Yeah,
totally. It's kind of interesting, and I don't know, you can totally like disagree with this if you want. I don't know if it was the mindset, but I found that when we were in Europe, it seemed like people locked their stuff up way more than South America. And the way I kind of like put it in my mind is I was like, okay, people in Europe are, I don't know what it was. In South America, I felt like it was like, okay, there's a lot of like potential of getting stuff stolen on the street. So it's like people come into hostels and they kind of like band together and don't steal each other's stuff as much as it seems like people thieve way more in hostels in Europe than in South America. But
yeah,
I don't
know.
I don't know if I just like created that in my head. Either way, I think that regardless of where you go, there's just certain things, like I said, passport, money, credit cards iPhone, if you've got one, or cell phone, computer, just put them in the lockers and lock them up. Locks are so...
It seems like such an obvious point.
Yeah. But I mean, like if you've never traveled before, you really don't have a concept of what that's like.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we have found it to be like very safe in terms of like how often we've heard stories of people getting their stuff stolen within a hostel.
Yeah, I mean, it happens very rarely. Don't be oblivious like to it. Like be aware that it can happen. But I think the biggest thing is like if you create rapport with your bunkmates or your dorm room mates, I guess, like they're less likely to steal from you when you've like had a conversation with them and like kind of become this like 5-minute friend, as I like to call it.
Yeah. You know what else is interesting? I'm reading this book, Influence, right now, which is kind of talking about, I think it's like influence the psychology of persuasion.
Are you trying to persuade me right now? Are you influencing me?
No.
Okay.
But one of the things they talk about an experiment in there where there's people on the beach and there's one person has stuff and then they leave their stuff and go off somewhere else. And then a second person who's part of the experiment comes and takes that stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's the subject of the experiment is just sitting right behind us. And if the person doesn't ask that person, only something like 15 to 20% of the time will that other person do anything to say like, hey, what are you doing? But if that person asks the person to watch your stuff, it's something closer to 90% of them will try to stop the person who's taking the thing.
Interesting. So like if you're at the beach and you're by yourself and you've got like some valuables and you have to go to the bathroom or you want to go for a swim, it's like 90% of people will actually watch your stuff and say something if somebody came to touch your stuff. If you ask them, hey, can you watch my stuff? I'm going to go for a swim.
Yeah.
Compared to 15%, you said?
Those numbers could be wrong. But there's something like, 20 to 80, 15 to 90, something like that.
Wow, that's crazy. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's something that like I've always kind of felt like a lot of times when we're traveling and like want to leave our stuff in the open, we've just like done it. Mm-hmm. Maybe felt like a bit hesitant to ask people to do something like that because like what are the odds of it actually happening are pretty low, but it does actually have a big impact if you ask someone to.
That's actually really interesting to my life right now because I spend a lot of time in coffee shops and I mean I'm by myself. I usually just like leave my setup there. I figure that in the time that it takes me to go to the washroom, somebody's probably not going to run in, steal my computer or my bag and run out. But I've kind of also had this idea in my mind that there's these people around me that have seen what I look like. And, if it was a male who came in, they're probably going to be like, whoa, like, wasn't there a girl sitting there? But that's actually really interesting to know that there's such a difference between, hey, could you just watch my stuff? I'm going to the washroom versus like not saying anything. Mm-hmm. Cool.
So moving into non-physical goods.
Yeah. So some of the sort of like tools, I guess we're going to deem it. That we use or that tools is a weird word, but so this is a category of things like sort of booking and that sort of thing. And something that's really important before you set out on a trip is to figure out having travel insurance.
But it's also, have you ever used travel insurance?
I've used it down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But before that?
No, never. And that's actually something that I just wanted to touch on that, you probably won't use it. Like if you're prepared and you're traveling safe and you've got, traveler's diarrhea medication or whatever with you, you probably won't use your travel insurance. But for the price that it costs you per day, I feel like it's worth it to have it because, we had a friend who we met up with in Barcelona when we were in Europe and she had to go to the hospital because she was cliff jumping and dislocated her shoulder when she landed. And her travel insurance would have paid for that when she got home. So I think it's really important to have that insurance in case something does happen to you because it can be really expensive.
Yeah. And it also is a little bit reassuring to know that you're if you feel like something's wrong and you don't have to have this panic, like, oh my God, what if something is wrong? And what if I'm going to have to go to the hospital and pay $3,000 to get this fixed?
Yeah, totally. And I think, make your own decision if you really don't have the money for it or you really don't feel like getting it because things don't seem to happen to you and you're really healthy. That's fine. That's you. It's just my suggestion is for peace of mind, I wouldn't travel without travel insurance.
Yeah, but definitely would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. You just never know when you're going to need it.
Every time I purchase travel insurance, I haven't put the effort into really digging into the terms and conditions of the travel insurance. But I think that it is interesting to consider. I do know that a lot of travel insurance won't cover extreme activities, things like skydiving, cliff jumping, surfing and snowboarding. So finding one that is kind of geared towards more of the backpacker audience.
Yeah, and we've got some links and stuff on our resources page. So if you guys want to check out that, then that's definitely there for you. We've also purchased travel insurance through our banks. So whatever bank you bank with probably has some travel insurance options. So check that out as well. I think it's really important to kind of shop around a little bit and look at what your different options are, and then pick something that's going to work best for you for your budget. Something else is purchasing flights. I mean, if you're traveling, you most likely need a flight somewhere.
It's hard to move through the air with that one.
Well, I mean, not everybody travels via air. Some people travel via bike or bus or train. So, but in most cases, if you're going somewhere far away, you're going to take an airplane at some point.
Obvious statement of the day.
Is it? I don't know. I feel like I could say something more obvious on this show. It happens. We usually use budget airlines. So one of our favorites is skyscanner.net. I think it's .net, isn't it? Yeah, it's .net. We'll put a link to it on the show notes, though. What other ones have we used?
It's not a budget airline. It's
Oh, sorry, not a budget airline. It's a budget website. So it's cheaper flights with like your every single airline. So it'll search your flight path and then it'll give you all the different options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you're traveling kind of like in the US area, Spirit Airlines is a great budget airline. We flew from Lima to Jamaica to Calgary via Spirit Airlines, and we saved so much money with them.
Yeah. I think everyone knows this already though. But like when you are flying with budget airlines, that there's usually some kind of like shifty terms and conditions and bags and stuff. So sometimes what you think is a cheaper flight actually turns out to be more expensive, because when you calculate, I've got to pay for my carry-on bag and pay for my big bag, and then I got to pay because I'm flying into an airport that's actually further away from the city. So
yeah, I mean, do your research on it. Don't just purchase it because it seems cheaper outwardly. I think something that's kind of, it's interesting, but it's crappy, is that most airlines now are charging extra fees for bags. Like American Airlines has put that in. WestJet does it now. It's this fee that you have to pay. So it's not just limited to the budget airlines anymore.
Yeah, I think they've all realized that people make purchasing decisions more off of that like face value price.
Yeah.
Which definitely like reasonably, I think that's true. Like if I see a flight that's $130 versus a flight that's $160,
you want the $130.
And then once I take a few steps in, I've got to think it's a bit of a sunk cost. And then they're like, okay, it's actually $25 to add your bag, and then there's some taxes, so it's actually like $167, but I've already come this far. And like I'm like, oh, there'll probably be the same shit on the other airline, which there is now, but before there wasn't. So
yeah,
I think it's becoming more of like the regular thing is you have to pay for bags, which is another reason to, if you can,
have a bag that you can just check in.
A really small bag, and then you save money on your flights, which allows you to spend money on clothing later on.
So the only thing that's like crappy about that though is if you're traveling longer term, I mean, you're limited to, you can't take a razor on. Your shampoo has to be small. Like you can only take so many liquids.
Those things are all pretty easy to buy wherever you're going. But I guess if you're flying to like one place in South America and then busing around the rest of the time, then I think that's an easy compromise to make. But yeah, if you're planning on flying around quite a bit.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I mean, to each his own, but I like to shave my armpits like every 2 days. So that's like not an ideal situation for me if I have to purchase a razor everywhere I go. But just figure out what works for you. Skyscanner is great. We've used Kayak, Cheapo Air.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of other.
Yeah, and if you guys have any that you really like, we're always happy to add to our list of cheap flight websites. I love cheap flights, so send them our way. Those are just a few of our favorites.
Yeah, and then the other, I don't think we have any like groundbreaking tools.
Don't sell ourselves short.
So we use Hostelworld the most when we're booking hostels.
Yeah, Hostel World is amazing. And I think we've talked about Hostel World on a few different episodes. And it's like, I love Hostel World. Like, Hostel World does not sponsor us. I promise you that. If they want to, that'd be sweet, but they don't. I just really genuinely love Hostel World. I think it's such an amazing service for people. And if you want to use hostels, definitely check out Hostel World, because the reviews are like in the moment, they're up to date, and it really keeps those hostels kind of accountable for providing a good service, because people stay there and they'll leave a crappy review if your hostel sucks.
Yeah. And it seems to be like a very well functioning reputation system, even more so than, like TripAdvisor or Yelp, because you book through Hostel World and then Hostel World sends you an email, and people do seem to get a more diverse range of reviews. Like, you can go see poor reviews and you can read them and say, this hostel was terrible, I couldn't party, everyone was just sleeping. And you can see that bad review and say, oh, this is actually a really good thing for me. Or you can see the reverse, where someone gives a hostel a bad review because it's loud, people are partying, and then you're like, oh, I'm actually looking to party, so this bad review is actually a good thing for me.
Yeah, which is super cool. There's a few other hostel websites that we've used. I think that Hostel World is definitely the best in my mind. It's cool too. You can get an app on your phone, so it makes it like really easy to book whenever you have Wi-Fi while you're traveling.
And then a couple, like, we've used Airbnb in the past, and I think if it, like, going forward, as we kind of transition from like younger to older, I think we'll use Airbnb more.
Yeah, I think that, our partying days are not quite as wild and crazy as they were when we traveled when we were 22. So Airbnb is nice, especially if you're a couple, or maybe a group of like girlfriends or guys who kind of want their own space. It's nice because you can rent out whole houses, or you can just find a room in somebody's house, and it's a really cool way to meet locals. So it's just another option for a different experience. And I think like it's really nice to switch it up sometimes. Like, Hunter really talked about this in the episode, not the last one, but the one before that. I'm just like rambling about Hunter right now. So in Hunter's episode, he talks about how, travel kind of became this routine thing for him, and he became a little bit bored with it. So I think that one way to kind of switch that up is like, instead of being like, oh, it's another hostel, it's another like crappy hostel kitchen, just like another group of loud people in my room, having that sort of like bored mentality, but something that's actually really cool. Switch it up, try an Airbnb, do something different.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like one of those problems where you can feel stressed about it. Like, sometimes I feel stressed because like people, like a couple of friends will like send me Facebook messages, and I'm like, oh, stressing me out. And then you're like, feel stressed, and you're like, oh wait, this is actually like an amazing problem to have. Yeah. I think it's kind of like similar, where you're like tired of a hostel and you're like, oh, meeting people from all over the world, it's
just like getting boring. Really exhausted.
Yeah, it's like, that's a good problem to have. But yeah, switching up and having your own space is amazing for a break from hostels. But hostels are also amazing because you get the social aspect, the community, which sometimes I think there are Airbnb where you can find that. Yeah. Where there's like a few other people staying there. The hosts are really like there.
Yeah.
And willing to show you around. But also sometimes it's not. But you can definitely find what you're looking for.
I think it's sometimes nice to just like take a shower and just like dump your towel and like just be naked for a couple seconds. Like, it's one of these things. It's like one of those like simple pleasures in life that you kind of like don't realize is a simple pleasure until you're in a hostel and you're like, oh, there's like a bunch of people around me. Like, I need to do this like shimmy shake to dry off and get my clothes on quickly, because it's not really like kosher for me to just drop my towel and like walk around nude.
Mm-hmm. And another thing, Airbnb is really, it's tough when you're one single person.
Yeah.
Price-wise, it's not tough. It's still cool and still great. But if the price of an Airbnb is usually not effective for one person compared to a hostel. Sometimes with two people, you can find an Airbnb that actually makes it cheaper than a hostel. Mm-hmm. But one cool thing is if you're with you're traveling with another person, you meet another couple people who are traveling, and you're both going to be in the same city for a while, or you're going to be in the same city in the future, and you trust these people, you can book an Airbnb together and share it. Like if you can find an apartment that's got 2 bedrooms,
Yeah.
you're a couple and you meet another couple, then you find this awesome situation.
Yeah, definitely. There's lots of really cool options, and that's a great way to kind of switch it up and like be with new people and kind of just have this really amazing experience. And from my experience with Airbnb, like people who are willing to open up their homes to strangers, they're really like curious about you. Like they want you to have a good time in that place, and they're trying to create this space where you feel at home. And I think that hostels, for the most part, do a good job about making travelers feel welcome. But there's something about being in somebody's home. It's just got this more homey feeling than a hostel dorm room does. Which is something that's really amazing, especially if you've been on the road for quite a while, to just like sink into like a really soft bed that's not a bunk bed and have like a proper duvet and maybe take like a really great shower in somebody's like fancy clean bathroom. It's just like this really great opportunity. So take advantage of it if that's something that you're looking for. So any other non-stuff tools that have come to your mind as we've been?
So one thing that we've kind of experienced, especially in South America, is that taxis can sometimes be dangerous. Or like you read stories about going to Colombia and you hear about like this $1 million ride stuff, about getting kidnapped in taxis. Or I remember going to Arequipa and they're like, oh, a lot of these taxis are actually fake, and they'll like just steal all your stuff.
Yeah, pretty unideal situation.
Yeah. And so the way they were dealing with that was like always making sure you were calling a cab and then waiting inside until that cab got there, so that you actually knew that it was a real cab. You never wanted to flag down a cab on the street. And then, so I think most people don't think of like Uber as like a real travel tool, but I think that
some people don't think of Uber at all. So
I think everybody thinks of Uber.
I think everyone in the US does, not everyone in Canada though.
Yeah, so Uber is like spectacular. It's my like probably favorite business.
Ryan's like, I think it'd be so cool to work for Uber. No, Uber is spectacular. We'll put a link in the show notes if you haven't heard of Uber before.
Everyone's heard of Uber.
Okay, everyone has heard of Uber, but if you haven't, link in the show notes.
Get out of your hole. But yeah, so it is an awesome way. Like taxis in North America generally suck. In developing countries, usually there are more of them because they don't have as many like regulations and stuff. So you go, and like Buenos Aires, for example, there's taxis everywhere, but there's a lot of scams. There's a lot of like shiftiness going on.
Crappy taxi drivers.
Yeah, they all suck. But it is amazing how you can just turn your head and there's a taxi.
Yeah.
But yeah, using Uber, it is usually pretty price comparable. A lot of places cheaper. Developing world, maybe not. But it is in a lot of those cities. Like it's in Buenos Aires, it's in Uruguay, it's in South American cities. So I definitely recommend using that. Yeah,
and so there's an app for Uber. You can just get your app before you leave. Friends looking at me like...
Everyone knows about Uber.
Everyone doesn't know about Uber. So you can get an app for Uber, download it on your phone before you leave, sign up, and then when you land in an airport, get on the airport Wi-Fi. And you need Wi-Fi for Uber, don't you?
I think you need a cellular connection.
Oh.
I'm actually not entirely sure if you can call an Uber connected to Wi-Fi, and then I think you might be able to.
I think you probably can. You probably just have to have like some sort of SIM card in your phone.
If you need to be connected the whole time.
Somebody knows the answer to that, reach out and let us know. We've used Uber a ton while traveling in the United States. And it's been, unfortunately, kicked out of Calgary where we were beforehand. So we haven't used it too much abroad, but it's definitely in the plans the next time we are on a big vacation, backpacking trip, to make sure we use it.
So the last kind of points we wanted to touch on were doing a bit of research about visas and reciprocity fees and like immigration requirements before you go traveling, because I think that visas is a pretty obvious one, but a few times we've done things not realizing that there were some rules we were missing out on, and then had like last minute panics about it.
Yeah, I think that like something for me is I really like live in this world where I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Like, that's weird. Like, oh, I need this to be able to do this. Like, why do I need that? Like, I'm smart. I'm organized. I just, the entire like, you can't come into my country without a visa thing, or you can't come in without paying is just a confusing concept to me. So sometimes I don't always think about it beforehand.
Yeah.
And,
do you want to give an example?
Yeah, I was going there. So one thing that comes to mind is we had booked flights from Greece over to Thailand, so Bangkok in Thailand. And, we're in a hostel in Athens. We're leaving on a flight the next morning. And we're like, we should probably just like double check that everything's like good to go, that we're all set. And then we start reading these things about how a lot of times your flight won't let you on the airplane if you don't have proof of exit outside of Thailand. And we're like, oh my God, like, we were planning to just like bus around, kind of play it by ear, just bus through whatever border kind of called to us type thing. And so we're panicking, like reading all these blogs. We're trying to read all this like visa information for Canadians. It's just like we're in a complete sort of like panic. Both of our parents want to talk to us because we've been on tour for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and especially was our first time going to a non European
to Asia.
So we were like feeling a bit nervous about going to Southeast Asia in the first place. And then you're like, oh shit, apparently you need to prove that you're leaving the country or else they won't even let you on the plane. So what we ended up doing was buying the cheapest plane tickets out of Thailand that we could find with like no real intention of actually taking that flight.
It was like a random flight from like Bangkok to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam.
We didn't actually end up even needing them. I think quite a few people getting on the plane were getting checked for their visas or for their flights out, but I guess
so apparently what we hadn't figured out is that you actually don't really need that for, or you didn't at the time. I was talking to Rory Madigan, a really good friend of ours, in the last episode, and he was saying how he's planning his trip to Southeast Asia into 2016, and they've actually changed a ton of the visa regulations for Southeast Asia. So don't just take what we just said as, okay, I'm Canadian, I don't need a flight to Thailand. I think the point of the story should be, before you go somewhere, really try to be organized.
Yeah.
Just do your due diligence and check to see what you need beforehand.
Yeah. And another example, we had booked a tour into the Argentinian side of Iguazu Falls, and we were in Brazil. And we'd heard stuff about needing to pay this reciprocity fee. So we had done that, but then we found out we needed to actually print it out
and have a copy of it
at the border. And so it was like 9 p.m. We had to find internet cafe that had a printer so we could print this thing out, because
our hostel's printer
wasn't broken, it wasn't working. And a lot of the times when you're following these like immigration policies, they're government stuff, so they have like weird things you have to do, like have a printed piece of paper, and it's not exactly clear what you're supposed to do. Like with the reciprocity fee for Argentina, for example, you can pay for like unlimited entries or one-time entry, but it turns out if you're just going for a day, you can actually use a one-time entry more than once. Mm-hmm. So word of mouth is really like so clarifying when it comes to stuff like this. And I think that's one of the best things about the internet, is how you can really get word of mouth stuff without actually being somewhere. So there's services like trippy.com, or you can get a lot of good travel answers, or Quora, or just kind of TripAdvisor forums, Lonely Planet forums, where you can get like good answers to these questions about. But I think it definitely is worth, when you're planning a trip, just looking into all the countries you're going to and taking like a quick look at the immigration requirements, because you might run across something. You might not need a visa to go somewhere, but you got to pay a fee. And then there's other countries, for example, Chile, where if you fly into Santiago, you've got to pay the fee. But if you take a land border in, you don't have to pay the fee.
Yeah, for Canadians at least.
Yeah, or other things like that, where there's ways around it. So...
Yeah, and I know that, if you're Canadian, you get into Bolivia without paying anything, but if you're American, you actually do need to pay something. And I think that's the type of situation where you show up at the Bolivian border and you can just pay for it right there. I'm pretty sure. Double check that one though if you are American and going to Bolivia. But I think that's what people said. People have told me. It's just this interesting, confusing process. I mean, it makes me think about the first time I went down to Peru and my friend and I were trying to do Machu Picchu on our own. Looking into all this information, like you don't just show up to Machu Picchu and have a ticket. Like you have a ticket for your day with your name on it, non-transferable, non-changeable for a different day, attached to your passport. Like there's just a lot of situations where there's really specific government rules that if you want to go to that country or you want to do that activity, you need to adhere to them and you have to do them properly. And it sucks. It's kind of stupid. A lot of times it doesn't make any sense, but if you want to go to these places, you have to do these things. So, as much as travel, it's so nice to be like, oh, I'm free of real life and I'm doing what I want and I'm going to go where I want and I'm going to just like be a gypsy soul and, float around and do your thing. Like, yeah, that's amazing. But there's certain elements of organization and planning that you do need to do, especially regarding like fees and visas. Countries just, they don't really care that you're this like free spirit who wants to go to this place and hang out at this, and they don't care what your plans are. If you've booked a flight to Brazil and you have booked a tour in Brazil, but you don't have a Brazilian visa, they don't give two shits about what you have going on there. You're not getting on that plane and you're not getting in that country. So it is something to take seriously.
Yeah, and even some countries you might not expect, but you will need like proof of exit, or it can come up. So even if it doesn't come up for like 9 out of 10 people, it might come up for you.
Yeah. So for that sort of thing, like checking your government travel website
it's not really clarifying.
It's not really clarifying. It's a good start. And then I found like blogs are really helpful. Like there's a lot of really amazing travel blogs out there that give really detailed information. I know when we were doing the border crossing between Thailand and Cambodia, which is like a pretty crazy, sketchy border to cross with a lot of different like loopholes that you kind of have to jump through and a lot of different scams they try to throw you through. Travelfish.org had a ton of really good information. Like they basically have articles written that walk you through step by step. And I was so grateful for that information because it was like, nope, like the article said, we're going to show up here. This isn't where we're supposed to go. Like, this is how much we should be paying. Like, this place is fake. This place is real. And it's just absurd to think that, a bus would drop you off at a fake border crossing that's trying to take your money. But the reality is that happens. And so, just be prepared for that sort of stuff so you don't get rejected or screwed over or that sort of thing.
Yeah. And then the final point of kind of like resources for learning to travel is kind of like a resource to try to avoid or to not take as seriously as you might have the urge to.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of travel warnings that you get on usually like your government webpage. I remember going to Colombia and feeling a bit nervous because it has this kind of like reputation from a while ago about being a sketchy place, and looking up travel warnings to Colombia, and you read stories about people getting kidnapped in taxis and like rebel groups and things like that. And I think there is some value to avoiding areas that there's obviously conflicts going on in. So like when we went to Cambodia, there's areas of Cambodia that apparently still have lots of landmines and lots of sketchy stuff going on. But generally, the fear you feel about going to a country is like not valid at all. And I think every experience we've had going to a country where we felt a bit nervous about going to, we like eventually felt comfortable there. Yeah,
definitely. So I think it's like, I wouldn't say like avoid those websites completely, like take them with a grain of salt though. So if you read something that says like the government of Canada advises you not to travel here, check that out further and then make your decision from there, because it might be like a legitimate concern. It might be legitimately dangerous, or it might just be, a warning that's out there for people because it's not as safe as the home country is.
Yeah. It's like more dangerous. And also like think for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Be smart.
Don't go to like Syria right now because we said to ignore travel warnings. Definitely don't ignore travel warnings, but just don't be terrified of places because you don't know for sure what's going on there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good piece of advice. Is there anything else?
I think we've covered it.
That we've learned through. We've covered everything. No, listeners, keep in mind that this is an evolving list, and if you have any go-tos that you really love that we haven't covered, we would love to hear it, because we'd love to learn about travel hacks and cheap ways to get places. And, if we can make our backpacks smaller and more organized, then that's amazing as well. So definitely reach out to us, www.theworldwanders.com. If you like the episode and you like the podcast, give us a like on Facebook, leave us a review on iTunes, or support us on patreon.com. We've got a page up there, and we'd love support, feedback, comments, hearing from you, anything like that. And as always, thanks for listening.
Thank you.